I walked to work in the rain every day, until Grandma said, "How's the car I bought you?" I froze. "What car?" Silence fell, and she learned my parents had handed it to my brother. You know that moment when your entire world shifts sideways and you realize everything you thought you knew was a lie? Yeah, that happened to me on a Tuesday. In my grandmother's living room. Over tea and those butter cookies she always kept in the tin with the faded roses on it. I'd been walking to work in the rain for 6 months straight. Every single day, trudging through puddles that seemed to appear overnight, my shoes squelching against wet pavement while I watched cars zip past me like I was some kind of street decoration. My coworkers thought I was either incredibly dedicated to fitness or too broke to afford gas. Truth was, I didn't have a car. Never had one. My parents always said we couldn't afford it, that public transportation and my own 2 feet were good enough for an 18-year-old. But that Tuesday, Grandma looked up from her crossword puzzle and asked the question that would unravel everything. "How's the car I bought you?" I froze. Actually froze. Like someone had hit pause on my entire existence. The teacup hovering halfway to my lips, steam curling up between us like a question mark made of vapor. "What car?" The words came out strangled, confused. The silence that followed wasn't the comfortable kind you get with family. It was the kind that precedes earthquakes, the stillness before everything you thought was solid starts cracking apart. Grandma's face went through about 5 different emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion, realization, anger, and something that looked like heartbreak all flickered across her weathered features before settling into a hard, cold fury I'd never seen before. "The blue Honda Civic," she said slowly, like she was talking to someone who might be having a stroke. "The one I bought you for your 18th birthday. 6 months ago." I felt the ground shift beneath me. Not metaphorically, I actually felt dizzy, like the room was tilting. "Grandma, I never got a car." Mom and Dad said. They said what? Her voice had gone quiet. Dangerously quiet. And that's when I learned that my parents had handed my car, to my brother Jake. Just like that. Like I didn't exist. Like 6 months of walking in the rain, missing job opportunities because I couldn't get there reliably, and watching my social life evaporate because I couldn't drive anywhere were just acceptable casualties in the grand scheme of keeping their golden boy happy. You want to know the really twisted part? I'd been grateful. Actually grateful that my parents were letting me live at home rent-free while I figured out my life. I'd been thanking them for their patience, their understanding, their support. Meanwhile, they were literally driving around in what should have been my independence. "Tell me everything," Grandma said, and her voice carried the kind of authority that made generals nervous. So I did. I told her about the morning I'd asked Dad if maybe we could look into getting me a used car, something cheap and reliable. How he'd sighed and launched into a lecture about responsibility and earning what you get. I told her about Mom's concerned face when I'd come home soaked and shivering, how she'd make me hot chocolate and talk about how character-building adversity could be, as if pneumonia was some kind of personality enhancement. I told her about watching Jake pull up in a blue Honda Civic I'd never seen before, how he'd mentioned casually that the parents had helped him out with a car because his old one died. How I'd felt that familiar stab of jealousy and immediately hated myself for it because Jake was my brother and I should be happy for him. The whole time, Grandma's expression grew darker. By the time I finished, she looked like she was planning a military campaign. 6 months, she said finally. 6 months you've been walking to work because you didn't know you owned a car. Owned? I laughed, but it came out bitter. Grandma, I don't own anything. I'm 18, unemployed half the time because I can't get to job interviews, and living in my childhood bedroom with a Pokemon poster I'm too sentimental to take down. You own that car, she said firmly. I have the paperwork. Your name is on the title. Has been since March 15th. March 15th. My birthday. The day my parents took me out for dinner and apologized that they couldn't afford to get me anything big, just a nice meal and a promise that things would get better. The day Jake coincidentally got his new car. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break, that would come later. Just crack, like ice under pressure. Why didn't they tell me? It came out as a whisper. Grandma leaned forward, her eyes blazing with the kind of righteous anger that topples governments. Because, sweetheart, your parents have been treating you like the spare tire they hope they'll never need. The truth of it hit me like a physical blow. Jake was the star, the college-bound, girlfriend-having, naturally charismatic golden child who could do no wrong. I was just there. The backup son. The insurance policy in case something happened to the real prize. I need to call them, I said, reaching for my phone. No. Grandma's voice was steel-wrapped in velvet. We're going to handle this differently. She stood up with the kind of purposeful energy that would have been impressive in someone half her age. Get your coat, dear. We're going car shopping. But Grandma, if Jake has the car, Jake has stolen property, she corrected. And your parents are accessories to theft. But we're going to be civilized about this. We're going to walk into that house, and we're going to have a conversation. The drive to my parents' house was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Grandma had called her lawyer. Apparently having money means you just have a lawyer on speed dial, and had gotten a quick consultation on exactly where everyone stood legally. The short version, Jake was driving a car he had no legal right to. My parents had committed fraud by forging my signature on some transfer documents, and I had enough grounds for a lawsuit that would make their heads spin. But lawsuits were messy, public, and would tear the family apart. Grandma had a different plan. "We're going to give them a choice," she explained as we pulled into the driveway behind the blue Honda Civic, my blue Honda Civic. "They can make this right quietly, or they can explain to the authorities why they've been committing fraud for 6 months. Seeing the car up close for the first time was surreal. It was perfect, exactly what I would have picked if I'd been car shopping. Clean, reliable, with good gas mileage and enough personality to not be boring. It should have been love at first sight, but instead, I felt robbed. 6 months of my life, gone. 6 months of opportunities, independence, and dignity, stolen by the people who were supposed to protect me. Mom answered the door with her usual bright smile, the one that faltered when she saw Grandma's expression. "Oh. Hi, Mom. Hi, honey. What a surprise. Come in, come in." We walked into the living room where Dad was watching television and Jake was sprawled on the couch with his laptop. The picture of domestic bliss, if you ignore the elephant-sized lie sitting in the driveway. "We need to talk," Grandma announced, and the temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Dad muted the TV with the expression of a man who knew his comfortable world was about to end. Jake looked up from his laptop with mild curiosity, completely unaware that he was about to become ground zero for a family explosion. "About what?" Mom asked, but her voice had gone tight. "About the car you bought for my grandson's 18th birthday, Grandma said pleasantly. "The one he's never seen." You could have heard a pin drop. Actually, you could have heard a pin drop from the second floor. Jake's face went white. Dad suddenly found the carpet fascinating, and Mom looked like she was trying to solve quantum physics in her head. "Mom, I can explain," Dad started. "Oh, please do," Grandma said, settling into her favorite chair like she was preparing for a show. "I'm dying to hear how you explain committing fraud." "Fraud?" Jake's voice cracked like he was going through puberty again. "What are you talking about?" I found my voice finally. "The car you've been driving for 6 months? It's mine. Grandma bought it for me. My name's on the title." Jake looked from me to the parents to Grandma, and I watched the realization dawn on his face. He wasn't stupid. He'd known something was off about getting a car out of nowhere. He'd just chosen not to ask questions because the answers might have been inconvenient. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "Yes, you did," I shot back, and I was surprised by the anger in my own voice. "You knew something was weird about it. You just didn't care because you were getting what you wanted." "That's not fair." "Fair?" I stood up, and for the first time in my life, my little brother actually looked intimidated. "Fair is me having my own car for the past 6 months instead of walking to work in the rain. Fair is my parents not lying to my face about why they couldn't afford to help me when they were actively stealing from me." "We weren't stealing," Mom protested, but her heart wasn't in it. Grandma pulled out a folder, because of course she brought documentation. "Actually, you were. This is a copy of the title. Your son's name, not Jake's. This is a copy of the bill of sale. Paid in full by me, intended as a gift for his 18th birthday. And this," she slid another paper across the coffee table, "is a copy of what appears to be a forged signature transferring the car to Jake." Dad picked up the paper and stared at it like it might spontaneously combust. We thought it would be better for Jake to have the car. He had college visits, he needed what I needed," I interrupted. "Transportation. Independence. The chance to build a life. But somehow, his needs were more important than mine." The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and heavy. Jake was staring at his hands, Mom was crying quietly, and Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "So here's what's going to happen," Grandma said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Jake is going to give the keys to his brother. Now. Today. This minute. And you too," she pointed at my parents, "are going to apologize and explain exactly why you thought this was acceptable behavior." "And if we don't?" Dad asked, trying to muster some defiance. "Then my lawyer calls the police and we press charges for fraud, theft, and conspiracy. Your choice." I watched my family make their decision in real time. It wasn't pretty. Dad's shoulders slumped in defeat, Mom's crying got louder, and Jake slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out the keys. "I really didn't know," he said as he handed them to me. "I mean, I suspected, but..." "You suspected and you didn't say anything," I said, taking the keys. They were warm from being in his pocket, and they felt strange in my hand. Like they belonged to someone else's life. "I'm sorry," he said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. "Sorry doesn't give me back 6 months," I replied, but some of the anger was already fading. Jake was my brother, and despite everything, I didn't want to hate him. Mom finally found her voice. "We thought We thought since you were staying home anyway, and Jake needed to get to college interviews. You thought I didn't matter as much, I finished for her. You thought my time, my opportunities, my independence were less valuable than his. That's not. Mom, that's exactly what you thought. And maybe you didn't say it out loud, maybe you didn't even admit it to yourselves, but that's what you believed. Otherwise, you would have told me about the car and let me decide if I wanted Jake to borrow it. Dad finally looked up from the carpet. You're right, he said quietly. We messed up. We messed up badly. It wasn't much, but it was the first honest thing he'd said all day. Why? I asked. Why didn't you just tell me? He was quiet for a long time. Because Jake asked, he said finally. He saw the car, and he asked if he could use it, and we said yes without thinking about what that meant for you. And then it got easier to just let it be his car than to explain why we'd made such a stupid decision. So you lied to me for 6 months. We admitted the truth, Mom corrected weakly. That's called lying, dear, Grandma said dryly. I looked around the room, at my parents, who couldn't meet my eyes, at my brother, who looked like he wanted to disappear, at my grandmother, who looked like she was prepared to burn everything down to protect me. And I realized something, I wasn't angry anymore. I was disappointed. And somehow, that felt worse. I need some air, I said, heading for the door. I walked outside to where my car, was parked. It was a beautiful vehicle, really. Clean lines, good condition, exactly the kind of reliable transportation that would have changed everything for me over the past 6 months. I ran my hand along the hood and tried to feel something other than hollow. Grandma followed me out a few minutes later. How are you holding up? She asked. I don't know, I said honestly. I thought I'd feel better. I thought getting the car back would fix things, but it doesn't fix the last 6 months. It doesn't fix the jobs I didn't get, the opportunities I missed, the nights I came home soaked and miserable while Jake was driving around in my car. She nodded. Getting what's yours back doesn't erase the time you spent without it. And it doesn't fix the fact that my parents looked at me and decided I was worth less than Jake. That my needs were negotiable and his weren't. No, she agreed. It doesn't. We stood there for a while, looking at the car that had caused so much drama. Finally, Grandma broke the silence. So what are you going to do now? I thought about it. Really thought about it. I'm going to drive myself to work tomorrow, I said. And I'm going to start looking for my own place. Good, she said. And if you need help with a deposit or anything. Thanks, Grandma. But I think I need to do this part myself. She smiled. I think you're right. We went back inside to find my parents and Jake exactly where we'd left them, looking like they were attending their own funeral. I'm taking the car, I announced. Tonight. And I'm going to be moving out as soon as I can find a place. Honey, you don't have to, Mom started. Yeah, I do, I said. I need some time to figure out if I can trust you guys again. And I need some space to be angry without feeling guilty about it. Dad nodded slowly. I understand. Do you? I asked. Because 6 months ago, you didn't understand that I might want my own car. 6 months ago, you didn't understand that lying to me might hurt our relationship. So forgive me if I'm not convinced you understand now. It was harsh, but it was honest. And honestly was something that had been in short supply around here lately. Jake spoke up from the couch. For what it's worth, I really am sorry. And if there's anything I can do to make it up to you. There is, I said. Next time someone gives you something that seems too good to be true, ask questions. Don't just take it because it's convenient. He nodded. I will. I looked around the room one more time. These people were my family, and I loved them, but I didn't like them very much right now. And that was okay. Sometimes love means admitting when someone has hurt you, even if they didn't mean to. I'll call you guys in a few days, I said. But right now, I need some space. Mom was crying again. We love you, honey. You know that, right? I know you say you do, I replied. But love is supposed to mean something. It's supposed to mean you consider my feelings, my needs, my future. And for 6 months, you didn't. I walked out to my car, it felt good to think those words, and got in. The seat was adjusted for Jake, who was taller than me, so I had to move everything around. The radio was set to his stations, and there were his sunglasses in the cup holder, his air freshener hanging from the mirror. For a moment, I felt like I was stealing someone else's car. Then I remembered, this was never his car. This was always mine. He was the one who'd been living a lie, not me. I started the engine and pulled out of the driveway, leaving my family to figure out how to live with what they'd done. In the rearview mirror, I could see Grandma getting into her car, probably heading home to call her lawyer and make sure everything was properly documented. The drive to my friend Marcus's house was smooth and quiet. The car handled beautifully, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could go anywhere. It was intoxicating and terrifying at the same time. Marcus was appropriately shocked when I told him the story. He was also appropriately angry on my behalf, which I appreciated. Sometimes you need someone else to validate that yes, what happened to you is messed up, and no, you're not overreacting. So what now? He asked as we sat in his kitchen, drinking coffee and processing everything. Now I figure out who I am when I'm not the family scapegoat, I said. Now I learn to drive my own car and make my own decisions and live my own life. And your parents? I thought about it. I don't know. Maybe we'll figure it out, maybe we won't. But I can't keep pretending that what they did was okay just to keep the peace. And I can't keep living in a house where my worth is negotiable. Marcus nodded. You can crash here as long as you need to. Thanks. But I think I need my own place. I need to prove to myself that I can do this. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. I found an apartment, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I got a better job, having reliable transportation opened up opportunities I'd never had before. I started dating. Turns out, having a car makes you significantly more attractive to potential partners. But the biggest change was in how I saw myself. For 18 years, I'd been the spare son, the backup plan, the one who got what was left over. Now I was just me. And it turned out that me was pretty decent when I wasn't being compared to Jake every 5 minutes. My parents called regularly. The conversations were awkward at first, full of apologies and explanations and promises to do better. Slowly, very slowly, we started to rebuild some trust. But it was different now. I wasn't their little boy anymore, and they weren't the infallible parents I thought they were. Jake and I had coffee a few times. He was genuinely sorry, and I could tell he was trying to understand why what happened was so wrong. We'd probably be okay eventually. Brothers usually are. But the person who really surprised me was Grandma. I'd always known she loved me, but I hadn't realized how fierce that love was. She'd been willing to blow up the entire family to make sure I got what was mine. That kind of loyalty is rare, and it changed how I thought about myself. If someone like Grandma thought I was worth fighting for, maybe I actually was. 3 months after that terrible Tuesday, I was driving home from work when my phone rang. It was Mom. Hi, honey, she said, and her voice was different somehow. Less careful, more genuine. I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you. You've built a good life for yourself. Thanks, Mom, I said, and I meant it. And I wanted to ask, would you like to come to dinner Sunday? Jake will be there, and Dad's making his famous lasagna. I thought about it. Sunday dinner had been a family tradition for years, but I'd been skipping them since I moved out. Part of it was still being angry, but part of it was just being busy with my new life. Will you promise not to act like nothing happened? I asked. I promise, she said. We need to talk about what we did, and we need to keep talking about it until we figure out how to be a family again. Okay, I said. I'll be there. And I would be. Because that's the thing about family, even when they hurt you, even when they let you down, even when they steal your car and lie about it for 6 months, they're still your family. That doesn't mean you have to accept bad treatment, and it doesn't mean you have to pretend nothing happened. But it means you can choose to forgive, slowly and carefully, if they're willing to do the work to earn it. I pulled into my apartment complex and parked my car, the one with my name on the title, the one I'd finally gotten to drive. Tomorrow I'd get up and drive myself to work, just like I had every day for 3 months. No more walking in the rain, no more missing opportunities, no more being invisible. As I walked up to my apartment, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even disappointed. I was just free. Free to make my own choices, free to build my own life, free to decide for myself what I was worth. And you know what? I was worth a lot more than I'd ever imagined. The funny thing about betrayal is that it shows you who you really are when everything falls apart. I'd always thought I was the weak one, the one who needed protection, the one who couldn't handle the real world. Turns out, I was wrong. I was the one who could walk away when walking away was necessary. I was the one who could rebuild when rebuilding was required. I was the one who could forgive without forgetting, love without enabling, and move forward without looking back. Not bad for the spare son. And every morning when I got in my car, the blue Honda Civic that had started this whole mess, I smiled. Not because I'd gotten what was mine, though that felt good. I smiled because I'd learned something valuable. Sometimes the best gift someone can give you is showing you exactly who they are. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Because once you know who people really are, you can decide what to do with that information. And that, more than any car, is true freedom. The last time I walked to work in the rain was 6 months ago. I didn't know it would be the last time, just like I didn't know my car was sitting in my parents' driveway the whole time. But that's life, isn't it? Full of surprises, some good and some terrible, all of them teaching you something about yourself if you're willing to pay attention. I'm paying attention now. And I'm driving my own car while I do it. But that's not where the story ends. Because life has this twisted sense of humor, and just when you think you've figured everything out, it throws you another curveball. It was about 4 months after I'd gotten my car back when Jake called me at 2 in the morning. Not texted, actually called, which immediately set off alarm bells because Jake never called anyone. He was strictly a text and social media communicator. Hello? I answered, already sitting up in bed. Can you come pick me up? His voice was shaky, small. Like he was 12 again and had gotten separated from us at the mall. Jake? What's wrong? Where are you? I'm at the police station. My blood went cold. What happened? Are you hurt? No, I'm fine. Physically. But I need someone to pick me up, and I can't call mom and dad. I was already getting dressed, phone wedged between my shoulder and ear. Why can't you call them? Silence. Then, because it's my fault. All of it. And they don't know yet. The police station was one of those fluorescent lit nightmares that made everyone look like they were dying of something terminal. Jake was sitting on a bench in the lobby, still in his college clothes but rumpled and stained with something I didn't want to identify. He looked up when I walked in, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before, genuine shame. Thank you for coming, he said quietly as we walked out to my car. What happened? I asked once we were both buckled in. Jake stared out the passenger window for a long time. I got arrested for drunk driving. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Jake. I know, okay? I know how stupid it was. I know how dangerous it was. I know I could have killed someone. His voice cracked on the last word. Were you driving your car? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Yeah. The one that. He couldn't finish the sentence. The one that was supposed to be mine, I said flatly. Yes. We drove in silence for a few minutes while I processed this information. Jake had been arrested for drunk driving in the car that should have been mine all along. The irony was so thick you could choke on it. How bad is it? I asked finally. Bad. Really bad. I blew way over the limit, and this is my second offense. I slammed on the brakes so hard we both jerked forward. Your second offense? The first one was 6 months ago, right after I got the car. But it was just a warning because my BAC was barely over the limit, and the cop was feeling generous. 6 months ago. Right around the time he'd gotten my car. Oh my gosh, Jake. I know. You've been driving drunk for months? In my car? It wasn't like that. What was it like? I pulled over to the side of the road because I needed to look at him. Tell me what it was like, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been risking other people's lives in a car that was never even yours to begin with. Jake finally looked at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. I was dealing with stuff, okay? College stress, girlfriend problems, pressure from mom and dad to be perfect all the time. And yeah, I made some really stupid choices. Stupid choices that could have gotten people killed. I know, he shouted, then immediately lowered his voice. I know, okay? You think I don't know that? You think I don't think about that every single day? I stared at my brother, really looked at him for the first time in months. He'd lost weight, his eyes were bloodshot, and there was a tremor in his hands that I didn't think was just from the cold. How long have you been drinking? I asked quietly. Since freshman year. But it got worse when. He stopped. When what? When I realized what mom and dad had done. With the car. I knew it was wrong, and I felt guilty about it, but I didn't know how to fix it. So I started drinking more to deal with the guilt, and then I needed to drive to get more alcohol, and it just spiraled. The pieces were clicking together in my head, forming a picture I didn't like. You've been drinking because you felt guilty about stealing my car? I didn't steal it, Jake. Okay, yes. I felt horrible about it. Every time I drove that car, I thought about you walking to work in the rain, and I hated myself a little more. I sat back in my seat, trying to process this new information. So instead of giving me the car back, you decided to develop a drinking problem? It wasn't a decision. It just happened. No, it didn't just happen. You made choices. Every single day, you made choices. We sat there in the dark, engine running, both of us trying to figure out what came next. I need to tell mom and dad, Jake said finally. Yeah, you do. Will you? Will you come with me? I thought about it. 6 months ago, I would have said yes immediately, because that's what big brothers do. They protect their little brothers, even when their little brothers don't deserve it. But I wasn't the same person I'd been 6 months ago. No, I said. This is your mess. You need to clean it up yourself. Jake nodded like he'd expected that answer. Fair enough. I drove him home and watched him walk up to the front door, shoulders squared like he was walking into battle. Maybe he was. I waited until he was inside before driving away, and I didn't feel guilty about leaving him to face the consequences alone. That was growth, I supposed. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 7 a.m. Mom, Dad, Jake, Mom again, Dad again. I let them all go to voicemail and went to work instead. I had a life to live, and it wasn't revolving around Jake's problems anymore. But life has a way of dragging you back into situations you're trying to avoid. 2 days later, Grandma called. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "About Jake?" "About Jake. About the car. About what happens next." An hour later, I was back in Grandma's living room, drinking tea and eating butter cookies while she laid out the situation with the cold precision of a military strategist. "Your brother's license has been suspended," she said. "Minimum 2 years, possibly longer depending on how the court case goes." "Okay. He can't drive the car." "Good. He shouldn't be driving anything." "Which means the car needs to go back to you." I set down my teacup. "Grandma, I already have the car." "No, dear. You have a car. Jake still has the title to your original car, the blue Honda. The one he's been driving drunk." I felt that familiar sinking sensation. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your parents never actually transferred the title back to you. Legally, Jake still owns your car." The room started spinning slightly. "But you said," I said I had the original paperwork. "And I do. But your parents filed additional paperwork after our confrontation, essentially selling the car from you to Jake for $1. It was legally questionable, but it went through. So Jake owns my car?" "Jake owns your car. Which he can't drive. For at least 2 years." I stood up and started pacing. "This is insane. This is absolutely insane." "It gets worse," Grandma said calmly. "How could it possibly get worse?" "Your parents want Jake to sell the car to pay for his lawyer and court fees. Which means your car, the car I bought for you, is going to disappear forever unless we do something about it." I stopped pacing and stared at her. "What kind of something?" "We buy it back. From Jake." "From Jake? Who's been driving it drunk?" "Who's been driving it drunk?" I sat back down heavily. "How much?" "Market value. About $12,000. $12,000. For a car that should have been mine all along. A car that had been damaged by months of drunk driving and who knows what else." "This is extortion," I said. "Yes, it is. And there's nothing we can do about it legally?" "Not without a lengthy court battle that would cost more than the car is worth." I put my head in my hands. "I can't afford $12,000, Grandma." "I can." I looked up at her. "You're not buying me another car." "Why not?" "Because I'm 24 years old, and I need to solve my own problems." "Even when those problems were created by other people's illegal actions?" "Especially then." Grandma smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made me nervous. "What if I told you there was another way?" "I'd ask what you were planning." "What if Jake didn't sell the car to pay his legal fees? What if someone else paid his legal fees in exchange for the car?" I stared at her. "You want to pay Jake's lawyer?" "I want to pay Jake's lawyer, and I want the car transferred back to you, and I want your parents to understand that actions have consequences." "Grandma, that's still $12,000, plus whatever the lawyer costs. Money I'm happy to spend to make sure justice is done." "It's not about justice anymore. It's about family." "Exactly." Over the next few days, Grandma negotiated with my parents like she was brokering a peace treaty between warring nations. The final agreement was complex but fair. Grandma would pay for Jake's legal representation and court fees, Jake would transfer the car back to me, and my parents would contribute $5,000 toward Jake's treatment at an inpatient rehabilitation facility. Yes, treatment. Because it turned out Jake's drinking problem was worse than any of us had realized. The DUI was just the tip of the iceberg. He'd been failing classes, missing work, and apparently had gotten into a fight with his roommate that resulted in campus security getting involved. The day we went to sign the paperwork, Jake looked like he'd been hit by a truck. His hands were shaking, his skin was pale and clammy, and he kept jumping at sudden noises. Withdrawal, I realized. He was going through alcohol withdrawal. "I'm sorry," he said to me as we sat in the lawyer's office. "I'm sorry about all of it. The car, the lying, the drinking. I messed up everything." "Yeah, you did," I agreed. "I know you probably hate me." I thought about it. "I don't hate you. I'm disappointed in you, and I'm angry about the situation, but I don't hate you." "I'm going to get help," he said. "Real help. 30 days inpatient, then outpatient therapy, then AA meetings." "Good. And when I get out, I want to make this up to you somehow. Jake, the only way you can make this up to me is by getting better and staying better. I don't need grand gestures. I need you to be the brother I thought I had." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I can do that. I hope so." The paperwork was signed, the title was transferred, and for the second time in a year, I walked out to my car knowing it was legally, officially, completely mine. But this time felt different. This time felt final. The car had been through a lot since I'd seen it last. There were dents I didn't remember, stains on the seats, and it smelled like a combination of alcohol and regret. It was going to need some work. But it was mine. 3 weeks later, Jake entered rehab. I drove him there in my car, freshly detailed and smelling like new car air freshener instead of old mistakes. "Thank you," he said as we pulled up to the facility. "For everything." "Thank Grandma," I said. "She's the one who made this possible." "I will. But I'm thanking you too. You could have walked away from all this, and you didn't." "Yes, I did," I said. "I walked away from the drama and the lies and the enabling. But I didn't walk away from you." He smiled for the first time in weeks. "There's a difference?" "There's a huge difference." I watched him walk into the treatment center with his single suitcase and a lot of hope. I didn't know if he'd make it. Addiction is a monster that doesn't give up easily, but I knew he was finally ready to fight it. The drive home was quiet and peaceful. My car that had been through theft and lies and drunk driving and legal battles, hummed along the highway like it was happy to finally be where it belonged. 6 months later, Jake graduated from his outpatient program. He'd lost more weight, but it was healthy weight loss this time. His eyes were clear, his hands were steady, and when he smiled, it reached his eyes for the first time in years. 1 year sober, he told me over coffee. We'd started meeting once a month, just to check in with each other. 1 year and counting. "How does it feel?" "Scary. Good. Hard. Like I'm finally awake after being asleep for years." "And how are things with Mom and Dad?" His smile faltered slightly. "Better. Slowly better. They're learning to treat me like I'm actually an adult instead of a child they need to protect from consequences." "That's progress. What about you and them?" I thought about it. "We're figuring it out. Sunday dinners are less awkward now. We can talk about what happened without everyone walking on eggshells." "Do you trust them again?" "I'm learning too. Trust isn't something you can just decide to have, it's something you build, piece by piece, choice by choice." Jake nodded. "I'm learning that too." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking our coffee and watching traffic go by. Normal brothers doing normal brother things. It felt good. "Can I ask you something?" Jake said finally. "Sure. Do you ever think about how different things would have been if I'd just asked questions when I got the car? If I'd pushed back when something seemed off?" "Every day," I said honestly. "But not in the way you think." "What do you mean?" "I mean, if you'd asked questions, yeah, I might have gotten my car 6 months earlier. But I also might not have learned that I could stand up for myself. I might not have learned that I was worth fighting for. I might not have gotten close to Grandma the way I have." "So you're glad it happened?" "I'm glad it's over. I'm glad we're both in better places now. I'm glad you're sober and I'm independent and our parents are learning to be honest. But am I glad you stole my car and developed a drinking problem?" "No, Jake. I'm not glad about that." He laughed, and it was a real laugh. "Fair enough. Besides," I added, "if none of this had happened, I never would have learned that Grandma is basically a superhero with a law degree and unlimited patience for family drama. She is pretty awesome. She's terrifying and wonderful and I'm glad she's on our side." As I drove home that day, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Jake, not at my parents, not at the situation. I was just grateful. Grateful for hard lessons learned, for relationships rebuilt on stronger foundations, for the discovery that I was tougher than I'd ever imagined. The car that had started as a symbol of betrayal had become a symbol of resilience. Every time I got behind the wheel, I was reminded that I could handle whatever life threw at me. I could walk away when walking away was necessary, and I could stay and fight when fighting was required. And most importantly, I'd learned the difference between the two. 2 years after that terrible Tuesday in Grandma's living room, I got engaged. Sarah was a nurse I'd met at a coffee shop near my apartment, and she had the kind of steady presence that made even the most chaotic days feel manageable. When I told her the whole story about the car, and by then it had become quite a story, she listened without judgment and then said, "Your grandmother sounds like someone I'd like to meet." The wedding was small but perfect. Jake was my best man, 1 year and 8 months sober, working a job he loved, and in a relationship with someone who understood his journey. My parents walked me down the aisle together, and if there were tears in their eyes, they were the good kind. Grandma sat in the front row wearing a hat that probably cost more than most people's cars, and when the officiant asked if anyone had objections, she raised her hand slightly and said, "I object to how long this took." Everyone laughed, including the officiant. At the reception, Jake gave a speech that made everyone cry. He talked about second chances and the importance of family and how sometimes the worst things that happen to you turn out to be the best things in disguise. He thanked me for not giving up on him, and he thanked Sarah for loving someone who came with a complicated family situation. But the moment that stuck with me was when he raised his glass and said, "To my brother, who taught me that stealing someone's car is bad, but stealing someone's future is worse. And to Grandma, who taught us all that there's no problem so big that the right lawyer can't solve it." Everyone laughed and drank, and I looked around at my family, flawed, complicated, sometimes infuriating, but ultimately mine. We'd been through the fire together, and we'd come out stronger on the other side. Later that night, as Sarah and I drove away from the reception in my car, the blue Honda Civic that had started this whole crazy journey, she asked me if I ever regretted how everything had played out. No, I said without hesitation. I wouldn't change any of it. Not even the 6 months of walking in the rain? Especially not the 6 months of walking in the rain. She squeezed my hand. Why? I thought about it as we drove through the quiet streets of our town. Because those 6 months taught me who I really was when everything was stripped away. They taught me that I could endure, that I could be patient, that I could keep moving forward even when the path wasn't clear. And they taught me that sometimes the people you love will let you down, but that doesn't mean you stop loving them. It just means you love them differently, more carefully, more intentionally. Sarah smiled. Your family's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have them. Even when they're driving me crazy. Especially then. Especially then. We drove the rest of the way home in comfortable silence, and I thought about how much had changed since that day when Grandma asked about my car. I'd gone from being the invisible spare son to being a man with his own life, his own choices, his own understanding of what family really meant. The car that had once represented everything I'd lost had become a symbol of everything I'd found: independence, self-respect, the knowledge that I was worth fighting for, and the understanding that love without honesty isn't really love at all. And every morning when I got in that car and drove to my life, my job, my apartment, my wife, my future, I remembered that sometimes the best gifts come disguised as the worst betrayals. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you had to discover everything you actually are. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, your grandmother will have a lawyer on speed dial. The last time I walked to work in the rain was 6 months ago. I didn't know it would be the last time, just like I didn't know my car was sitting in my parents' driveway the whole time. But that's life, isn't it? Full of surprises, some good and some terrible, all of them teaching you something about yourself if you're willing to pay attention. I'm paying attention now. And I'm driving my own car while I do it. But more than that, I'm driving toward a future I built myself, with people who chose to love me honestly instead of conveniently. And that, more than any car, is worth the journey.